Well, I think as professionals reach the final stage of their full-time career, and they are beginning to think about a third part of their career, possibly a portfolio career of non-executive roles or trustee positions. And I think as they reach that moment, and they make the transition into what we call a plural life or a portfolio career, the first thing really to think about is motivation and what shape of life do you want in this next phase. Now, so some questions to ask yourself are: how busy do you want to be? How many roles do you want to take on? Some people see their non-executive portfolio as an extension of executive life, and they want to be just as busy as they were. Other people want a very different work-life balance. So working out what you want out of a portfolio career is important. And it's important also to ask yourself, does that need to be wholly commercial? Do these need to be paid roles? What is the mix of paid or unpaid roles? And from those beginnings, when you work out what it is that you want out of a portfolio career, then it's obviously much easier to go out and find the specific things that you want.
So which professionals are most likely to get which roles?
So certainly out of the big four and other accountancy firms, there is a natural route into the boardroom via the audit chair position. That is a natural transition. Finance is the language of business. It is a language that people out of the profession speak fluently, and therefore there is a very obvious route ladder from one to the other. That said, I think in my experience, my clients, companies, certainly in the quoted sector, probably have a preference for people who have come up through the CFO route, so have some industry operating experience as well. So that is a point to consider. For the legal minds, this is where I'm sorry to say that you wish that you'd had your career in America, because as we all know, American boardrooms are stuffed full of lawyers, and I'm afraid the same is not true in the UK. Off the top of my head, I can think of a handful of career lawyers who occupy FTSE 350 roles, for example. Does that mean give up? Absolutely not. There is a wealth of opportunity there for people out of the legal profession, and I think there are some things to bear in mind. First, I'm very familiar with the fact that people at the top of the legal profession in the latter part of their career are probably as much business leaders as they are lawyers. And I meet a lot of senior lawyers who say, look, I haven't actually written any legal text for as long as I can remember. And I'm fully aware they run multi-billion, tens of thousand employee, multi-site international people businesses. And I think it's almost that is the way that you need to present yourself as much as the legal expertise. And by the way, that goes for accountants as well. But I think in both cases, really anyone out of the professional services sector needs to think about a broad waterfront of non-exec opportunities. It's not simply the FTSE 350. There is a wide world beyond that takes you into smaller quoted companies, family-owned companies, private equity, and not to mention the world of public appointments and even charity trusteeships as well.
Okay, what do people have to do to position themselves to get these roles?
I'm afraid the answer is the dreaded networking. So as a first, as a starting point, I'm afraid even in the world of LinkedIn, a CV is still the tool of my trade. It's still an essential piece of kit to have. So that is the starting point. You were probably told this when, as you were a graduate recruit, to put your CV together, and I'm afraid it's now true all over again. Now, traditionally, a CV is just it's a list of job titles and dates, and that remains, that remains some of the key information that we need. But really, your CV is an opportunity to unpack who you are and how you can contribute. So I always encourage people to think, what is the sort of organization that is going to be looking for someone like me, and what is the contribution that I can make to that sort of organization? That may be, that may be back in their core legal or financial skills, or it may be around new market entry, or it may be around engagement with the city, or indeed it may be running a professional services organization, running knowledge workers. But it helps, I think, people to unpack their career in terms of skills, in terms of the experience that they can bring to bear. And I think we quite like some hard metrics: the teams, the size of the teams that you ran, the revenues, the growth, whatever KPIs are important in your career is helpful. It's helpful to share. And then I quite like either an introductory paragraph at the top, or even a cover email. That needn't be a huge piece of work, but just unpacking that point about where do you fit, what sort of organization, what sort of size, what is a company going through that needs someone like you. Because our job is when a client gives us a brief, we're told, we've got a hole this shape, please go and find some pegs that are shaped that way. And look, no one likes being put in boxes, but that's what we do. We go and find people in particular boxes. And I find there is a tendency for people as they enter this phase of their career to try and be all things to all people, and they've done growth, they've done cost cutting, they've done UK, they've done international, and if you try and be everything to everyone, you end up pleasing no one. So I encourage people through their CV and through this period of reflection that I've talked about to really work out what their 3 or 4 spikes are. What is it they're really good at? What is it that they're uniquely good at? Express that through the CV, express that through the cover note, and articulate, the sorts of quite defined roles that you are looking for, because that is infinitely more helpful to us.
How important is it to have had some kind of role in, say, anything from being a governor of a school or a non-exec before to get the next one? I mean, you've always got that virtuous circle thing, isn't it? Where do you start in getting experience, and how much does it count?
Well, the best single credential for being a non-executive director is to be a non-executive director. So this is all about getting the first one. And look, if you're a FTSE 100 chief executive, you're not going to have to wait too long. There's a natural pathway from one to the other. But for everyone else, you probably have to work it a little bit. And I encourage people to think in terms of stepping stones. And you might have an ambition to have, a fully commercial career in your portfolio in a certain number of years' time. Well, it may take time to get there, and you may have to take some sideways steps along the way. And I think it's critical, really, for people to develop as much non-executive experience as they can, as early as they can, because it is a completely different job. It is it's very unusual being asked to contribute to the strategy and direction and oversight of an organization on the basis of 2 days a month or even less. So I encourage people absolutely to think in those two other buckets that I mentioned earlier. The world of public appointments is a very good place to start. The government appoints something like 1,000 non-executive directors a year. Now that may be your local NHS trust, which may not appeal. There may be lots of areas of that world that aren't germane to you and your career, but there'll be plenty that are. And they're all listed in a single place, and they're all open for transparently open competition, some involving us, some not. So I'd encourage you to go and look at the Public Appointments Commission website. And I would also encourage people to think about charities that they're interested in, engaged with, issues that they're engaged with, and therefore motivated to contribute and make a difference. And that just begins to tell a story that you know what it means to be a trustee, you know what it means to be a non-executive director, you know how to contribute on that part-time basis. And I think that's all very helpful.